Alright, so last video we looked at idea of how evolution could change alleles within a population, which was microevolution, and now we're going to look at macroevolution, which is basically speciation. We're going to look at how different species have been created, essentially. So there are these types, there are natural selection that are, well, they're specific. So you see, regularly our majority of the population is this color, this fur color of rats. However, natural selection can create three different types of selection. First is stabilizing selection, so it keeps on selecting the majority, and so the population of the minority goes down, and the population of the majority goes up. Or we have a directional selection, so one side is favored over the other. So let's say that right now in this case, the darker side is clearly favored over the light side. So our population has zoomed right. So more dark colored rats exist and less little color or less light colored rat exists. So the disruptive one, this is the one that's actually really harmful, is that we're trying to kill all majorities, but instead we're trying to promote the minorities. So you see, the majority color is now wiped, and it's all becoming the white one and the black one. So this could potentially cause the creation of two different types of species. So, a species, what do we mean by a species? Well, it's a group of individuals that can interbreed and produce a viable offspring. Remember, a viable offspring. So when an individual or a group of individuals change so much that they are no longer able to reproduce and make a viable offspring, we get speciation. So remember, it's macroevolution. So again, in here, this one is probably the most obvious one. When this dark one gets so dark, essentially it starts developing other features. And when this light rat changes so much, it starts developing other features. So when they change too much apart from each other, they don't become like they're no longer the same type of rats. They became a new type of species, and that is speciation. So how exactly do we get speciation? Well, a very great example or a very great method of this is isolation. So when a part of a population becomes reproductively isolated or just physically isolated, they're going to change, and they're going to be able to only reproduce within their community, and essentially they're not going to be able to reproduce with their species, and that is a new type of species. So there's a variety of mechanisms by which this could possibly happen. So we have reproductive isolating mechanisms. Prezygotic is basically before it mates, before the sexual, all that process happens. Postzygotic is after sexual reproduction, after trying to sexual reproduction, and there are prevention of hybrids and all that. So we're gonna go into each one of them. Prevention of mating. So there's behavioral isolation. So as we saw a couple lessons ago, we had the video of the bird trying to find blue rings. So what if suddenly some other birds, they decide to realize, oh, you know what? I'm going to find green rings instead. So they are behavioral isolating. So now the female bird's like, hey, I like blue ones. Why are you giving me green ones? And suddenly there's these other types of female. They're like, hey, I like these green ones. I don't like the blue ones. So suddenly they are behavioral isolated. Now they're two different types of species because they don't mate at all. So the meadowlarks, they actually sing a song. So they have this octave that they sing in. So the regular ones, they sing in 5 different tones. It was C, D, something, C, D, E, F, G. And then the other ones sing in 12 tone. So, but the female, some of them can hear 5 tone. Some of them can only hear 12 tone. So the 12 tone female bird can never mate with the male bird that can only sing 5 tones because she thinks it's not good. She thinks it's bad. She thinks it's ugly. Well, she thinks it's not as beautiful as a 12-tone song. So now they're behavioral isolated and they cannot mate together. And then temporal isolation is the timing is completely different. So let's say I have a flower that blooms in the summer that wants to pollinate and get some baby flowers going out. But then the male counterpart of it, or let's say other male flowers, they bloom in the winter. Their pollen is never going to meet at all. They will never meet. So therefore, if the timing is unavailable, that is isolation. And remember, nature caused all of this. Everything that we have, isolation and all of this, most of them is caused by nature. And then we have the most common one is habitat isolation. So they're in the same general region, however, they're slightly different habitats. So we have garter snakes. So garter snakes, some of them live in waters, so well more moisture area, and some of them live in dry areas. So that difference caused them to not be able to survive in the other area, which essentially means that they will never go to the other area, and they will never be able to reproduce in that area. Now, prevention of fertilization. So prevention of fertilization means that they are able to satisfy all of these factors. They can mate, they can have the same time to mate, they're living in the same region, the same habitat. Now they want to mate. So before they actually do that sexual process, here are some other possible prevention. So mechanical isolation. So their part doesn't fit. Insects. So a male reproductive organ does not fit in the female's reproductive organ. Or the ducks, they have these weird shaped ones, so they don't get raped or something. So that is an isolation. You cannot reproduce. So their sperm is never going to meet the gamete egg cell. Now, the gametic isolation. So outside, sure, you did everything. You are able to mate. Now you do the sexual reproduction, but you realize, hey, the sperm cell and the egg cells are not compatible. They don't work. So they cannot make a successful offspring. That's an incompatible internal environment. So it means that they're still not able to fertilize. However, you think that's it? No. So even after you mate, and even after the sperm has fertilized an egg cell, we can still prevent this. Hybrid inviolability. So it prevents normal mitosis. It means that you have this hybrid, and this hybrid is not gonna do anything. It can't reproduce. And goats and sheep are a great part of that. So hybrid inviolability, it's more towards that the reproductive barrier that prevents this hybrid from developing into an actual healthy adult. So yes, sure, you can have a hybrid, but you can have this kid. However, it just doesn't work. It doesn't grow into a healthy adult. It will eventually die. And then we have hybrid sterility, or whatever how you pronounce it. So hybrid, they're unable to sexually reproduce. Sure, a horse and a donkey make mules, but mules cannot reproduce. Sure, mules are great workers for the environment, but they cannot reproduce. So once the horse and the donkey, they reproduce to produce a mule, they will never get a grandchildren, and in biological sense, that is not fit. So hybrid breakdown is that one generation is possible, but the second fails. So more to like, sure, it can go on for one more generation, but you will never have grandchildren. So essentially, it's still going to die. And that's how this whole speciation is created. So when they learn that they're not going to be able to make more generations, the animal will not lean towards to reproduce with that animal. So for example, donkeys and horses, unless we decide that we want some mule workers to, mow the land or something instead of using a tractor, but sure, why not? We want some mules, so we create these mules. So otherwise, if they're just found in environments, a horse won't likely try to sexually reproduce with a donkey, because they realize, oh wait, we can only have one generation. We can't become grandparents. That's not good. So types of speciation. We talk, there's how things are created. So we have sympatric speciation. It's the same geographic area. Gene flow is altered. Chromosomal changes and non-random mating comes into play. So meaning some sort of stuff change, and now suddenly your DNA is not working, or you can't reproduce in that. So it's primarily in plants. You gotta know this. So allopatric speciation. So this you gotta know. Sympatric is DNA change, chromosomal change, and allopatric is geographical barriers. So two groups are separated to a point where they can no longer interbreed. So edges of populations, especially when small, so founders effect, remember last class. So if a bunch of Europeans came to Canada and a bunch of Europeans went to United States, California, so suddenly the Europeans, well actually no, not Europeans, let's say some animals, some came to Quebec and it's really cold, and some went to California and it's really hot. And now they're like, oh, I'm developing special features because I'm trying to cater to this hot or cold weather. And they realize, oh, I can't interbreed with you anymore because what's going to happen to our children? So that's allopatric speciation, or generally, geographic barrier means they just can't get to each other. Adaptive radiation. So once they're separated, a new population has a new niches to exploit. It often occurs after the evolution of one new characteristic. We can look at Darwin's finches. Now this was all on an island, and this was a common ancestor, right here. It's from the South American mainland, and then it came to this island, and then it made it with different stuff. And now, because they don't have much prey, they don't have much predators, so they all live. All right. They have the ground finches, we have the tree finches, and we have the warbler finches. Well, whatever. So all of them gets to live because there aren't much things hunting them down. So you have these are seed eaters. They survive because they eat seeds. They survive because they eat seeds. They eat flowers. And these they eat insects. And these they eat bud. And I don't know what these two eat. But you know, all of them, they want different food. And they don't have a predator on this island. So it means that all of this is going to survive. It's really interesting. It's really interesting that they came from the same ancestor. But now, all of these, they can't interbreed anymore. That's really sad, honestly. So we have types of evolution. So we have the diversion and conversion. So in grade 10 we learned diversion and conversion lenses, but diversion was that species, they were once very similar. However, after they were similar, they part their ways and they become increasingly distinct. They don't become close to each other. And then we have conversion. They have similar traits developed because of similar environments, and eventually they're all going to meet in this same point where they're able to actually be able to reproduce now, and they're able to make that viable offspring because they have developed similar features because of similar environmental conditions. So they meet. So diversion is that they diverge and go into different space, and conversion means that they came from different space and they're going to all converge at this one space. Now, the speed of evolution. We have gradualism, which is the idea that we're slowly changing. So you see, we have this, and suddenly it develops into two of this, and this gets a little more brown, this gets a little more red, and that's gradualism. And punctuated equilibrium, that's when you're like, oh, maybe suddenly it just separated into the other one. And instead of slowly showing us the step, it's going to be like, oh, suddenly it formed this red type of butterflies, and suddenly this one just continues on, and suddenly it formed these dark ones. So, mass extinction. We're looking at, this is the dinosaur era, and this is probably somewhere near the ice age. So we have these mass extinction rate. We can see that it's pretty interesting how this is like a cycle. It goes up, down, up, down, up, down. So it's a natural disasters, and we're kind of stable here. So we actually we are one of the biggest factors of this now. So we wasn't quite a big factor of this a while ago, or let's say a couple hundred years ago, because we didn't like, doing all these experiments with animals. We're like, because people believed in something, they had a religion. They're like, hey, you know what? Maybe I should just stay here. I should not care about the animals. They were put in here by God, so let God do His job. We're not gonna change anything. But no. We're different now. We changed a lot of these lands that the animals live in. We changed it to croplands because we need to eat. We also did all of these recreational and tourism or wilderness development to make sure that, hey, we're happy, we're making profit. We also had to develop roads and urban subdivisions, and we had to do hydroelectric dams, which means that we're hurting a lot of the animals and we're creating new species. Because we changed all of these to croplands, the things that they used to live maybe in this forest or this grassland, they now have to adapt to this new cropland. And these things that we create in this recreational and tourism wilderness, they now have to adapt in a much smaller area. Because remember, we never built this before. So they weren't trapped in this forest. Now they are trapped. Hydroelectric dams means that a lot of these sea animals, they gotta move away, and potentially moving away means like whether a change in water temperature or a change in habitat or a pH level, whatever, they have to adapt, and we created a lot of species because of our human activities. And obviously, it's a good thing and a bad thing. I mean, everything is a double-sided blade. And yeah, that is the last class of this unit. So there are a couple gizmos that I wanted you to do, and I posted them under each videos. If you could do them and analyze what you learned, write me like a paragraph and I'll be good. I'll be doing a review sheet for this unit. I will also be doing a review test for this unit, and I will get the plants unit review sheet out very quick. Alright.